Hi, everyone. Hello again, and welcome to the Conservation Areas Workshop International Panel. We're going to get things off and running, but first we want to acknowledge the title sponsors who have contributed so generously to our workshop. Links to find out more about our sponsors will be posted in the chat, but now a quick video.
Explore the newest in picnic table designs by SMD Inc., including complete aluminum models with perforated table decks and seats, and our 8-foot-long wheelchair-accessible picnic tables. While accessible on both ends, they can also be used as a standard table, as the benches and table measure the same length. Visit www.sgate.ca for more information. That's www.sgate.ca. And most of all, thanks to all the conservation authorities for their continuous orders. We sincerely appreciate your business. All the best from the MSD team.
Spending time with family.
It means family dinners, hot dogs,
campfires.
It means s'mores.
Spending time on the beach.
Eating salt and vinegar chips on the sand specifically.
Going hiking.
It means trail mix.
Is all you think about is food?
No.
Nogrumack is built on 20 years of commercial equipment, vehicle rental, and leasing experience. Supplying municipal, construction, industrial, and tradesmen in Ontario, we specialize in designing customized and flexible solutions for your business. Nogrumack understands that capital is limited, and buying equipment doesn't always make sense if there is no return on the investment. Instead, invest your capital in projects that drive a positive return. Nogrumack customers return because they know Nogrumack is not like traditional rental and leasing companies. Customers are treated on a whole different level. Visit www.nogrumackinc.com for more on how Nogrumack can help you.
And with that, good evening again, and welcome everyone to a very special webinar. We are so thrilled to offer you the opportunity to sit in on an important discussion tonight, navigating the challenges of a pandemic in parks and open spaces, past, present, and future. The Workshop Committee, Conservation Ontario, Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, and our panelists have been really looking forward to this discussion. We're aiming for an 8 p.m. wrap-up, but if the discussion is really moving, we might go over by a few minutes. Mine will be one of the voices you hear moderating this webinar. I'm Tori Fisher, co-chair of the Conservation Areas Workshop and Conservation Parks Administrator with Credit Valley Conservation in Ontario, Canada. David Orr is my co-worker and co-chair of the CA's workshop. He's the senior specialist of enforcement, and both of us have shared the responsibility of leading the Conservation Areas Workshop for 2 years now, along with our delightful and talented planning committee, who are working behind the scenes to provide a platform for discussions like these. And now we'll turn our attention to Brenna Bartley, the Education Manager of Conservation Halton, and CAA Workshop Committee member for our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Tori. It's my pleasure to be presenting the land acknowledgement tonight. So as we gather together virtually from across the globe, we first want to turn our minds to acknowledging and thanking the many Indigenous nations on whose traditional and treaty territory we live and work. We recognize the complexity of these relationships in the international context of this panel and the audience, and we encourage you to seek out more information on Indigenous relationships within the specific land on which you live. As a collective, we recognize and deeply appreciate the relationships, past and present, that Indigenous nations have with the lands and waters. We acknowledge that Indigenous practices of land stewardship have created the clean waters and healthy forests, meadows, and wetlands that benefit and enrich the lives of all. We recognize our own responsibility to protect and steward the environment for future generations and to work with Indigenous communities to ensure equitable access and respectful representation. In the languages of the nations on whose traditional and treaty territory I personally stand today, Miigwech, Niawe, Tiawink, Marci. Thank you, Tori.
Thank you, Brenna. All right, next, we want to take a moment to learn a bit more about you with some poll questions. So we're going to launch a poll. There's 3 questions, if you would take some time to submit your answers. Wow, we have a very diverse mix of folks here today, except it seems like the bulk of us are from Southern Ontario. We've got some Northern Ontario representation here. Some folks from the US, Mexico, and Australia, which is great to see. Lots of authority staff, Conservation Authority management. Looks like a pretty even mix of, here, I'll just share my results with you. I'm just interpreting them as they come in. So looks like what we're looking for today from today's topics are a good mix of what we've put up there: information on operations and maintenance, policy procedures, visitor services and management, communications and education. Wow, pretty even divide. So we'll see what we can get through today, but this is really good information for our moderator and panelists to know before we start. So thank you for contributing to the poll. So a few housekeeping items before we get going. So this webinar is being recorded. It'll be available to all registrants after the webinar ends. Your mics will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. In the interest of time tonight, we are not accepting raised hands or live verbal questions back and forth to allow our moderator and our panelists to have an organic and uninterrupted discussion. However, our panelists are really interested in hearing about your experiences. So as discussions will be moderated by a series of prompting questions, we invite all of you to utilize the chat feature by responding to the same questions asked of our panelists. So should an item of discussion prompt you to share a similar or different experience, perspective, solution, or idea, please type it into the chat. You can start your chat with your job title or your organization if you'd like. We're going to send out a test in the chat and a Q&A example so you can follow suit. So after the webinar has concluded, we're going to save the chat record and provide it to our panelists and to you if desired. So the Q&A feature is open, and we may have time to address a few questions. For those that didn't have your questions answered, we'd invite you to connect with the panelists individually. I'll share their email addresses when they conclude tonight, and they have graciously offered to follow up with all of you. So tonight, we have a diverse panel of speakers. And they're going to discuss their organization's shared impacts, adjustments, and experiences across 3 pandemic periods, the early pandemic, the mid-pandemic, and the post-pandemic look at a future in parks and open spaces. So to bring you closer to the speakers we have with us today, please enjoy a series of videos introducing you to our discussion leaders and the incredible organizations that they come from.
Hi, I'm Brian Kemp, and I'm General Manager of Conservation Lands with the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. We are one of 36 conservation authorities in the province of Ontario, and our watershed is located approximately an hour north of Toronto. I've been fortunate to spend my entire career in the Lake Simcoe watershed, a watershed which I grew up in, and I've been fortunate to spend my career with the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. As General Manager of Conservation Lands, I am responsible for our afforestation program, all of our conservation areas, the ongoing maintenance and enhancement of those places, and our outdoor education program.
Hello, I'm Simon Walpole from Lake Macquarie City Council in New South Wales, Australia. I want to start out by paying my respects to the traditional owners of the land that I'm speaking to you from, the Worimi people, and the land that I work on, the Wabakal people, and their traditional owners past, present and emerging. Lake Macquarie Council is a local government authority, and we look after a city of about 750 square kilometres. We have a population of 200,000 people, and the city is dominated by a large saltwater coastal lake with 110 square kilometres in the middle of the city. Our city has lots of natural areas, beaches and the lake, as I mentioned earlier. My role at Council is to coordinate the actions of the Environmental Strategy team. That team does biodiversity planning for the city, including natural areas and conservation planning. We also do what we call resilience planning, so looking after natural disasters, flooding, sea level rise, as well as having a role in contaminated land management and a few other things. In terms of natural areas, we do the strategic management of those areas, and the council looks after a number of quite a large areas of natural parts of the city, and that's also complemented by the national parks that are also within the city. I look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Hi, I'm Stephen Schauer. I'm the Director of External Communications for the San Antonio River Authority. We're standing here next to the San Antonio River, just south of downtown San Antonio, the 7th largest city in the United States. San Antonio River Authority is a special district of the state of Texas. We were created to help take care of the river from here and its urban headwaters in the city of San Antonio as the river flows 240 miles all the way towards the Gulf of Mexico. Our mission at the River Authority is safe, clean, and enjoyable creeks and rivers. Back in 2017, the San Antonio River was recognized by the International River Foundation as the winner of the International River Prize. Some of that work that we were recognized for is just south of me along the Mission Reach Ecosystem Restoration Project, one of the nation's largest urban ecosystem restoration projects. And that was a project that was very instrumental in helping our community gain World Heritage status for the San Antonio Missions, the first World Heritage designation in the state of Texas. So I look forward to talking to you today and the other panelists about how we were able to maintain our open spaces, our green spaces, our parks, our hike and bike trails, how we were able to keep all of those open and active for the citizens that we serve during the past 2 years of this COVID pandemic that we've all been experiencing around the world. On a personal note, one of the things that I enjoy doing is getting out and kayaking the San Antonio River. I've had the pleasure of kayaking almost the entire 240 miles to the Gulf of Mexico. And when I'm not out kayaking, I enjoy the hike and bike trails at the San Antonio River Authority parks. And I also like getting out to see the state parks and national parks that are in our area as well. In fact, Big Bend National Park is one of my favorite places on the entire planet to just go and rest and recharge. Really looking forward to having this conversation with you today and learning from others on this panel and sharing information with you about how we take care of our parks and open space here in the San Antonio River Basin. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mario Hernandez, General Manager to the Botanical Gardens El Charco del Ingenio here in San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, Mexico, center part of Mexico. And our approach, our focus, our mission is to protect and conserve natural habitats here in the central part of Mexico, the semi-arid part of Mexico. We also work a lot with environmental education with different school groups and the community, and also scientific research.
In the beginning, there was nature, the oceans, the forests, the mountains, and so history was passed on, and memories took shape, defining us, uniting us, creating a legacy that's ours to preserve, and ours to celebrate. Beauty amazing, got a kiss from the sun, and that thing will be blazing. I'm dreaming, dream catches, catching on my field, catches forest run, running the river to the water, feel lots of jump, jumping to the beat, birds flying to the creek, part of the plan, dirt on my feet, feeling the breeze, feeling that beat it, I beat it, a beast, feeling that peace, feeling that ease, hold up, can't be fighting the feeling I need. A message from the Government of Canada.
My name is Carmen Davis, and I'm the coordinator of the Willamette Laha Partnership, which unites professionals at all different levels for conservation and peer-to-peer learning in Mexico, Central Guanajuato, in the watershed of the Laha, with professionals here, as well as university students and youth in the Willamette, which is located in northwestern Oregon. I want to acknowledge the floodplain behind me in this area that I call home in rural Lynn County. The Kalapuya peoples were forced to leave their land and move on to a reservation because of the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855. Today they are part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde as well as the Silex. I have moved into my next phase of career, and what is so important to me is currently diversity, equity, and inclusion in the work that we do. I have been involved in so many expensive, wonderful, beautiful restoration projects, especially on natural areas, protected areas by state parks and land trusts. And so I want to give back to our community so that they can enjoy these places, and that all of our investment in restoring habitats is resilient. I also have family and kids. So with diversity, equity, and inclusion, it really hits home as it pertains to conservation. And I do all I can to incorporate my children in all of my own learning and adventure and exploration in this world.
Hi, my name is Carmen Davis, and my mom has been taking me around the world with her, and I love seeing birds and rivers and fish, and I just like exploring. She's like a really cool explorer, so she does a lot of fun things. And I'm also a volunteer for the Salmon Watch group, and I hope you have a nice time listening to this video and watching it.
All right, so I think with that, that's more than enough for me. And those are some incredible introductory videos. So take it away, Brian, our moderator for tonight's discussion. And a big thank you and a welcome to our panelists. I'll give it over to you.
Thank you very much, Tori. And yeah, what a way to kick it off. If any of you got on early in the session, you got to listen to some Tragically Hip. What a way to start things, and it only keeps getting better. It's unfortunate that Tara's daughter can't join us tonight on the panel. I think she would offer some incredible insight through the lens of one of our young people. I'm going to ask all the panelists if they could turn on their videos, and we're going to get started. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Tara, you're looking like a hummingbird tonight, but that's okay. So yeah, let's get started on this this panel discussion, and I'll give you a bit of background on how we got to where we are today. So over the past number of years, I've had the distinct pleasure of getting to know, and in some cases, working alongside the members of this evening's international panel. I would even go so far as to say a number of them are my friends. Through informal discussions and informal workshops, such as a recent DEIJ workshop hosted by Tara Davis in the Willamette River of Oregon, I'd been engaged in dialogue about the trials and tribulations of providing parks and open spaces to our respective communities. This led to an internal dialogue with Phil Davis and Dan Andrews here at LSRCA about sharing these stories and lessons learned across the Conservation Authorities network, something I firmly believe in, something I've been part of for over 30 years, and something that I think we can all take some value from. So here we are. We've landed on an international panel discussion about navigating the challenges of a pandemic in parks and open spaces, past, present, and future. I couldn't be more excited to moderate this evening's, morning, or afternoon, depending on where in the world you are, panel discussion. And I'm incredibly thankful for the support of our panelists, and of course, all of you for taking the time to join us. Now, let's get into our panel discussion, shall we? And here's how it's going to work. I have 3 questions. Well, maybe a few more. And I'm going to be directing these questions to our panelists in no particular order, other than early pandemic, mid-pandemic, and what we're talking about now as post-pandemic, the optimistic side in all of us. Let's get past this, let's move on. So let's have some discussion about post-pandemic. First question or topic we're going to talk about this evening is early days. So shortly after New Year's in 2020, COVID-19 took hold globally and ushered in a pandemic. Lockdowns marked the early days of the pandemic, with governments imposing restrictions to citizens, limiting their mobility with few outlets. My first question on that is going to go to Mario Hernandez in Mexico and Mark Schmidt out in the East Coast of Canada. In the early days, and this is, I guess I'll go to Mario first, and then Mark will follow up second on this question. In early days, what challenges did your team face that impacted your park visitation? Localized property or infrastructure impacts, any operational adjustments and lessons learned through the experience? And what was the most difficult hurdle to overcome while adjusting to what we called then the new normal? So Mario, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thank you everyone who put all this together. We are very thankful for the opportunity to be here and share our experience here in central Mexico. Definitely this pandemic has changed the management experience of many of our natural parks. In the beginning of the pandemic, it was definitely something difficult because, of course, living in Mexico and with a large population under the line of poverty, it was difficult for much of the community to be able to really just lock down. You know, many of the families were needing to work and to be able to bring income to each family. So even though they were wanting to lock down, economically, they had the need to go out and seek for an income in order to be able to survive. And in this situation, pretty much of what was going on at the Botanical Gardens at Chaco del Ingenio also drew us to the point that we had to close our doors definitely because of federal laws stating that these areas were needing to really just be locked down and people should just stay home. However, all the operation and supervision and security needed for all this area was still there. I mean, looking after all this land, it was not going to take care of itself. So we definitely had to put together activities with a smaller group or staff in order to do everything that was still needing to be done. So right at that point, it was difficult because when everything really just hit the harshest moment, we were finding that people wanting to visit were not wanting to use their face mask were saying, well, this is an outdoors place, so why can't we not wear the face mask, you know? And we were really insisting that we understood that this was definitely a green, nice, healthy place, but we really needed to take care of our staff. So we were asking people to that they needed to use their face mask at that moment. And this gave us an opportunity to really consider other options at the moment. You know, everyone was mostly at that time staying home, keeping in touch through social networks. So we decided to go out and develop these short videos and post them on Facebook, on YouTube, and that allowed us to continue having this great communication and explain to the community this specific time of our lives, especially this element combined of global climate change, zoonosis, and the reflection and the thinking of all this situation as to where we're at the moment. And we were definitely, you know, putting together these operation manuals. We also start to train and certify all our staff through federal protocols. And through this exercise, we had the opportunity to be acknowledged as an essential activity. And because of being an essential activity, we had the federal authorization to open our doors at a certain point. And this was definitely a real soothing time, because much of the people who were just staying home finally had an opportunity to go outdoors, walk through the grounds, and discover and be amazed of all the effects of that were going on just by taking all the people out of all these natural areas. We, of course, started to identify and notice a lot of different wildflowers that were starting to show, a lot of different migratory birds that were now in the property, and that was very positive for us to understand. And I guess the lessons learned is basically that we humans need to downsize. I think we definitely need to consider a change in our patterns of production and consumption, because this situation is definitely having an impact all over the world in order for us to continue consuming and consuming. So at this point, we also had the opportunity to go down and rethink all the indigenous practices that were going on in this territory way before, and to also carry out a new areas for people to understand and learn of our natural endemic resources. So we created 4 new gardens, one of medicinal plants, one with plants that are used in specific construction rituals in as for food, one with agaves, agabaces, and another with opuntias, which are important plants and very much representative of the landscape of this area. Through all this process, definitely we had to learn a lot. We had to train our staff, and that gave us an opportunity to really teach the community wanting to approach botanical gardens and the grounds that this was a situation that was needing the cooperation of all the community. And that was a big challenge, because we were hearing all over the news and different areas, much of all the frightening, all the fright and scare that was going all around, especially here in Mexico, in a situation where population was not being vaccinated, because at that time there weren't the conditions to vaccinate the population. Fortunately, today the president has done a very strong and important action, and we are among the 11 countries throughout the world that have been vaccinated most of their population. So this has allowed us to engage and reactivate activities and definitely speak out to the community that we need to change our patterns of production and consumption to be able to help our earth to regain its natural structure.
Thank you very much, Mario. And I know we had some conversation over the last few weeks, and the one thing that you pointed out to us, and I'm going to assume that we can call it a difficult hurdle, and that was the decision that was made to close shop, and all of your staff basically were without a job for 5 months while you were shut down. What I was intrigued about, Mario, was the fact that the move was made, and we hear this time and time again, but the move that you made, because of the importance of your facility to the community, was to ensure that for those 5 months, if I have that correct, 5 months, that those staff would continue to be paid, because it was so critically important to the community and the good of the community, knowing that they would be coming back. So that was a takeaway when we had a conversation a few weeks ago that I was astounded by. So thank you, Mario. And I'm going to move to Mark, and then if there's others that want to chime in, please do. So Mark, same questions around early days and impacts, the hurdle in association with this new normal.
For sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the organizers for inviting me. I'm actually coming to you right now from Southern Ontario, from my basement of my house in Ontario, although I do work for a national park based in Nova Scotia. So I actually work for Kejimkujik National Park, a National Historic Site. Today, though, I'm going to be talking about Parks Canada in a whole, not just necessarily the park that I was at, because the early day impacts of COVID had a definite impact clear across the country, and it had significant impacts on national parks, national historic sites, national marine conservation areas. So I can start by saying that it's been over 2 years now, and I hate to admit it, but it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget what it was like before. It's easy to forget what it was like when it all came down. The initial reaction that we had at Parks Canada was just a reaction of unknown. I really remember the day. This is the one part I do remember, when we were basically told that everybody is going home and that we are locking the gates. Parks Canada doesn't actually have gates. We are federal land, and we are stewards of the land for the people of Canada. And because of that, the people of Canada can use our lands whenever they choose. So technically, we never really locked our gates, but we went from sites across the country that had full staff complement, full complement of programs and activities, to no complement of staff, no programs, no activities. The challenge with that, though, is that the visitors were still coming, and that was something that we learned very quickly. Initially, visitation dropped. We, like in Nova Scotia, where the park that I work is, there was actually travel restrictions out of counties, and so people were potentially going to be fined for traveling in their outside of their county. The park that I currently work in actually is over 3 counties, so we really struggled with how we're going to manage people from other counties coming in when the park itself is within the 3 counties. So we ran into some really unique changes right from the beginning. Fortunately, though, just like Mario, you said, right, parks and open spaces became an essential product, an essential service that was offered and needed for people of Canada. So we were quick to reintroduce staff and some programs back to our parks. So I guess the biggest challenge initially was just simply that unknown. And even when staff began to return, was what do we do? Masking obviously was an issue. Vaccination was an issue. All the same issues that all of us have around the world were the same issues for us. Where we really struggled, though, was just the uncertainty about how staff can interact with people. So fortunately, Parks Canada is a large agency of the federal government, And we do have some strong leadership. And the very first thing that we did was there was a recognized from our sort of national office that we needed some clear guidance. And so Parks Canada actually began developing different operational plans for COVID. And those operational guidance included everything from how to interact with visitors, how to interact with staff, how to enter and exit buildings. If you are using a car, how to properly disinfect the vehicle once you're done using it. So we were able to get some very clear direction, and the direction rolled out quickly. And I'm not going to say the direction that rolled out quickly was perfect to begin with, but at least we had something to move forward with. And that allowed us an opportunity to really open our doors back up in a different style of opening our doors. So just as an example, visitor centers, which are a common thing at all of our national parks, were restricted to the amount of people who could be in those visitor centers. Gift shops that our typical Friends of organizations run, we're limiting to one family per gift shop. So even though we were now offering the same services that we once were, we actually had to bring in additional staff to help monitor the entry to these different buildings. We had to bring in additional resources for checking in to make sure people have been vaccinated. Unfortunately, for camping in the outdoors, you don't technically need to be fully vaccinated to do it. For our roofed accommodations that we have, though, we did have to have proof of fully vaccination. So, there was every time a new protocol would roll out, a new change would happen, we'd have to completely rejig our operations. But in the end, we succeeded. We got through it. We got through the ups and downs, and we will continue to get through the up and downs of this pandemic. And our protocols, our guidance will continue to evolve. And I don't want to say this is going to be our new normal. I think our new normal is going to be constantly evolving. And later on we'll talk about the future. But those early days were definitely challenging for us. And the biggest hurdle I think that I saw with my staff, so I have 54 staff that basically meet and greet and provide a level of service to all the visitors that come to our sites. The biggest hurdle I had, the biggest challenge I had, was when you have a group of staff that thrive off of the visitors, that love interacting with people, that love sharing stories, that love telling about the history of the park, explaining about the environment of the park. And we have a large group of interpreters who, to be a good interpreter, you don't just sell a program, you basically you sell yourself to the visitor. So we have this very high level of service, this very high level of standard that we provide for our visitors, and to then go and tell our staff that we can't do that anymore, that had a huge impact. And that was the biggest struggle that we had for Parks Canada staff in those early days, was just not being able to do what they want to do and what they love to do. And we've again, I'll talk about this later on, but we definitely use this for future opportunities, and incorporated some of those early lessons and how we can improve moving forward into the future. But the second hurdle that I'll just add in real quickly is the changing dynamic of our visitors, both good and bad. So everybody who's out there probably saw an increased amount of visitation through day use, people just wanting to get out and do something. We did have some visitors who treated outdoor spaces, not just national parks, but all outdoor spaces, as their way of escaping, of getting away from the closures and the restrictions that were in place. And so there was a little bit of disrespect, I believe, that was putting into the outdoors, and that is something that we had to deal with. And then on top of that, some of the visitors who were just frustrated, living through the time of the pandemic, we would have visitors that would arrive in our park and just would be plain old angry and just rude to our staff. So that was something that we've had to really adapt and change the way we greet and visit with our and engage with our visitors when they first arrive. I'd say for every bad interaction that my staff or myself has with the visitor, we probably have 1,000 incredible interactions, but it's those negative interactions that take a toll on the staff. So yeah. So again, more guidance protocol put in place, more training has evolved to deal with these frustrated visitors. But in the end, I'm kind of happy we're past that point now. And definitely, like I said, lessons have been learned, and we will move forward to a new and ever evolving future, but a future that I think is going to be welcoming to visitors, and visitors having a lot more respect for the places that we have again. So.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mark. And those two hurdles, having staff that love what they're doing, and this is why, so many of us are in this field because we love what we're doing, and then to have that taken away and not have that interaction with the public that you're so used to is that's a hard pill to swallow, and something that we're going to have to work to get back. That's for sure. And the the negative energy thing, you've nailed it. We have so many positive interactions, and it's just that one negative one that just really sucks the energy out of us. We hope that isn't the new normal. You're quite right, Mark, and that we can move on and just focus solely on this positive stuff. I've got about a minute before we move to the next question. I don't know if any of the other panelists, is that Carmen? I don't know if any of the other panelists just wanted to chime in very quickly with another example or something anecdotal around that first one. If not, we can move on to the next question. So I'm just scanning the panel. We're good. Okay, then we'll just keep moving forward. So we've got past that first part of the pandemic. I'm making it sound all so trivial here. And we survived 2020, and we're starting to move into 2021, which seems like forever ago. And the term pivot started to emerge. If I could ask all 105 people that are on this call to raise their hand if they have used the term pivot, I'm sure the vast majority would say yes. So the term pivot was starting to emerge everywhere. It was occurring everywhere. And all of us in parks and open space management were adapting, often on the fly. And typically when you pivot on the fly, the public doesn't understand and creates a little bit of fuss. But we were pivoting into the new realities. My next question in regards to that time period is directed to Simon Walpole, with beautiful Lake Macquarie in the background, and Steve Shower down in San Antonio, Texas. And the question is, what trends emerged that impacted visitation and visitation management, park and related operations, and/or property impacts? And I know, Mark, you quickly touched on property impacts and some of the negative impacts. Were there new partnerships? Excuse me, were there new partnerships or opportunities that had followed? And if you have some examples of technology in this section, please do share. And Simon, I'm going to go to you first, and then we'll follow up with Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So in Australia, the COVID story was similar, but a little bit different to what was there elsewhere. Particularly, you'll get a bit of a contrasting view with Steve in Texas. So in 2021, for most of COVID, our international borders have been closed. They actually only opened on Monday this week. And we also had border closures through most of 2021 between states. So we didn't have people coming in from overseas, which was a big part of Australia's visitation, tourist economy, and natural areas and visitors to our natural parks. We traditionally come overseas, and Australians would go overseas for their holidays. That hasn't happened, and hasn't happened. And also we had, Australians would traditionally go to where I'm in New South Wales, would often go to Queensland and visit areas like the Great Barrier Reef and the Daintree or Northern Territory, some of the big, well-renowned national parks like Kakadu. That couldn't happen either because of border closures. So people were discovering the areas within their state, in their region. So we saw that visitation shift considerably. So people were still getting out and going into the natural areas. And that shifted even more as in the middle of 2021, when we went into fairly stringent lockdown conditions here.
So there was public health orders that said people weren't allowed to leave their home, essentially, weren't allowed to travel more than 5 kilometres from their house. So we had seen people discovering their states, their regions. We then saw a shift to people still wanting to get out and exercise, but rediscovering or discovering for the first time the little bit of natural areas, the creek or riparian zone, and the bushland that was in their backyard all the time that they'd never been to before. So this local rediscovery of nature, I think, is something that we really saw here, and that was, little pockets of bushland that people had driven past. It was 2 minutes away, never been to before. People were going out on their daily works and finding these areas for the first time, which is, I think, a really good trend that I hope will continue. We also have a fairly strong program here of land care. So in Lake Macquarie City, we have 200 volunteer groups called land care groups who are looking after bushlands on council land. Whilst other areas, particularly in Steve area, was probably opening up, we went into lockdown and those land care activities couldn't continue. And we saw, and I think, a bit of guerrilla land carrying. So people were going out and doing their own things and trying to manage that. It's been something that we've tried to do, and recognising the link between those activities and people's mental health and well-being was something that we tried to do, but we also had public health orders to follow with. We did see a significant pivot with our community engagement and environmental education programs that we run in the city, as all of those activities, which were often outdoor based, all shifted to online and virtual platforms, something that I imagine most of us have experienced. And I think that's something that we've seen, good levels of engagement, albeit different. But I think having virtual options is something that will continue on, because it's something gives us a whole range of different opportunities, like we're seeing now. For me, something we probably wouldn't have done previously, having me talking from Australia over Zoom, and delivering those programs and talks and different activities. Also, we've been shifting to activities that people can do on themselves, so virtual tours and treasure hunts and those types of activities, which are moderated, and use of online content to still get people to go out, explore our natural areas, understand some of the ecosystems and natural heritage of the city, but do that in with their own families in their own time, and to do that safely.
Sorry, Simon, I was just trying to get myself off mute there. Thank you for that, Simon. And just very quickly, if you could just touch on some of the trends you saw around equipment and technology that people that might not otherwise have invested. You started, I know you had mentioned in a conversation about this, and I know we're all going to be waiting.
A lot of our monitoring programs that we have done as a city, either water quality monitoring or monitoring our beaches, we've seen a growing trend over the last little while now of moving to remote sensing technologies, and that really came into its own during COVID, when it was very difficult to get crews into the field, particularly ones coming from out of areas. So we had contractors and consultants that were based in other areas. They weren't able to travel to our area to do those ongoing monitoring programs. So we had invested in some remote sensing, LiDAR, sensor rollouts of different types of water quality parameters. And we also monitoring people usage as well, people counting canvas and those sorts of things. So we did see a fairly good uptake of those systems. There was, like anyone, some of those things are new. Some worked, some didn't. Particularly during those times when we couldn't get people out to check on things. But I think that will be a lasting, impact that we'll see, that remote sensing technologies. There's some amazing things you can do without having to go to a site nowadays. But we still want to make sure that that's complemented by people, feet on the ground and people going to areas as well. We had to shift more to the remote, but hopefully that's starting to come back a bit more of a balance. But we'll see the ongoing impact of that.
Right. Thanks, Simon. Stephen, over to you. Same questions around trends that emerged that impacted visitation and such, new partnerships, opportunities, technologies. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Brian, for the question. When talking about pivoting, I guess for us here in San Antonio, kind of need to break it up into two different categories of pivots. There's the pivot for public use of our parks, and I'll talk a little bit about that first. And then there's the pivot for our own use, the agency's use of our parks and open space for field trips and public events and things of that nature. So with regards to the pivots around public use of our parks and green space, here in our area, the parks and green spaces never closed, with the exception of Easter weekend and the 4th of July in 2020. And we closed our parks in coordination with other city parks and county parks just for those two occasions, because they're holidays that are celebrated in our area that tend to draw lots of people to our parks and green spaces. And in the early parts of the pandemic, we didn't want people gathering in mass numbers in our parks, even though our parks were still open. So, but beyond those two closures, the parks remained open. And we did initially close some playground equipment and stop taking pavilion reservations and shut down the water fountains and the public bathrooms for a period of time as well. But by the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, all of those park amenities were back fully available to the public as well. So our pivoting with regards to the public use of our parks was very quick in that time frame. It wasn't even a full year between temporary closures of some amenities and those amenities being fully offered again. So the biggest impacts with regards to pivoting was how are we trying to operate those parks with our staff? So we had to look at new ways for our crews to operate in smaller teams that could be further separated out, so that they could keep some distance from each other while still trying to manage our ecosystem restoration projects, manage the trash, collection in parks and the basic maintenance that needs to happen, since our parks were still open and we're seeing a dramatic increase of usage as has been talked about with some of the others. Really in that early phases of the spring and summer of 2020, we were seeing well over an 80% increase of usage from the previous year in the same time period. So we were seeing more visitors than we'd ever seen before, and then trying to manage that with crews in a safer way. So that was the biggest pivoting that we had to do with regards to the operations of the parks. And one of the trends that we were noticing then, unfortunately, it's a trend that I think is not just unique to us, but it's a public trash trend. People not necessarily doing the right thing by packing in and packing it out. So we saw an uptick in trash collection and trash issues. And we have since, as a result of that, launched a very public campaign about "Don't Let Litter Trash Your River." We're trying to promote trash collection, citizen responsibility around that. We'll go out there and keep picking it up, but if the citizens wouldn't leave it there in the first place, that's certainly would be a big step in the right direction. And we're encouraging the use of the Literati app as a piece of technology. If y'all are familiar with that, it's a global app where folks can take photos of trash that they see on the ground and then hopefully pick it up and properly dispose of it. But that photo then can become very valuable data as far as what types of trash and locations of trash are found throughout the community. So that's kind of the first aspect of pivoting. The second aspect of pivoting was really how we used our own parks and open spaces. As I mentioned, the park stayed open, But in Texas, particularly in 2020, during the early months of the pandemic, there was a very public discussion taking place between state and local elected officials about closures and masks and emergency orders and who had the authority to do what. And there was very different opinions coming from our state elected officials versus our local elected officials, and those different opinions, right or wrongly, were drawn largely along political lines. We avoided getting involved in that, and we made a decision early on that we were going to stop having in-person events, even when we still could have. We just thought it was the right thing to do to not continue with that. And for us, that was a big decision. You know, pre-pandemic, we were hosting close to 300 events a year in our parks. Including educational field trips. So to shut all that off was a big, quick pivot for us. And like many of y'all have already talked about, Mario and Simon, we went into video production. We started creating videos with local artists and local musicians in our parks. We did a whole video series about recreating in our parks, so the folks that were out there using our parks could still learn how to use things properly, since we weren't necessarily there showing them in person. And our education team, I want to brag on them just a little bit. They pivoted to create a whole virtual education program called River Camp. And they did that rather quickly in 2020. And by the fall of 2020, we were collaborating, to your question about collaboration and other partnerships, we started collaborating with Virginia Tech, Clemson University, and the University of North Carolina on a national study evaluating virtual programming and its effectiveness. And the kudos that I want to give to my team is that for this study with these other universities, they determined that our programs excelled over other organizations, meaning the performance of our programs were above the mean compared to other network participants across the country. And I'm very proud of our team for how quickly they changed from doing in-person field trips to creating this very useful video series that they've gone on to share with others around the country and presented at the International River Symposium and the North American Association of Environmental Education Conference. So it's a successful pivot there, going from field trips to virtual. By now, we're already back in person again. Now, that's probably something that might be a little bit different than some of areas as well. I mean, by the summer of 2020, we were back to doing in-person, 2021 rather, we were back to doing in-person events. So we're in a, kind of pivoting rather quickly through this pandemic, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stephen. And the beauty of this international panel is just what you have stated. You're kind of through the pivot and moving on. Some of us are a little bit behind that. And, we talked about this panel. That was one of the reasons we went to the groups that we did, was to hear about that. Is you've lived through that pivot, you successfully pivoted, and now you're moving on to the next stage. So, the 100+ people that are on this call today are going to be calling you because we want to know what the future holds for us, I guess. So thank you for all of that. I know we have a couple minutes on this question still, and I just wanted to go back to Mark for a quick comment. Genevieve from the municipality of Chatham-Kent down in southwestern Ontario has made a comment about trail counters and understanding trends in trail counting, what numbers they're seeing, where we're seeing spikes and things like that. And I just wonder, Mark, if you can take a minute or two to talk a little bit about the data that you're working up as far as visitation and trends.
Sure. Sorry, just tried to regroup there for a moment. Putting on a different hat to talk about trail counters for a moment, but that's all right. My past is as a trail specialist, and that's where I spent most of my time, was working on trail projects. The trend around trail counters, the new technology around trail counters has definitely improved drastically. And I guess it all really depends on what you do with the data that you have. And that's sort of the bottom line of trail counter data, is they're only as good as what you do with that data. At Parks Canada, specifically for trail counters, we are currently using a variety of different types of counters. We still use the traditional infrared counters, which are good. But you know, in my experience with those counters is when I used to set counters up frequently, I would actually set up 2 counters, one on the first post, and then about a couple meters away, I'd set up a second counter in order to get accurate data, because that first counter was the one that all the visitors would wave their hands in front of, would walk back and forth of as many times as they could, and then by the time they got the second counter, they would ignore it. So so that's just a little counter tip there. One of the new things that we've really been experimenting with, and it's actually helped us not just for trails, but just understand our visitor flow in the park. We've been working with a new counter that actually, if we do have cellular service, we can actually collect that trail counter data through real time. So I can basically log on to my website and I can actually see how many people have gone through that counter at any given moment of the day, whether it's the middle of the night or in the morning. If anybody's ever been to Banff National Park and has been on the Legacy Trail, which is the trail that connects the town of Canmore to the town site of Banff, we actually have these eco counters based on that trail. So you can actually see what number you are who've entered that trail for the day, or over the week or over the year. Now, where we've gone beyond just using these as an understanding of how many users we're getting on our trails, we're also really starting to realize where our visitation peaks. And I found this to be a really interesting thing. So I actually worked on a project where it was in Edmonton at Elk Island National Park, where they were using their counter data, and they actually realized that there was high visitation happening in the park between midnight and 2 a.m. when there was no staff there. And you know, without using that counter data, they would never have discovered that. Turns out that it happens to be an incredible location to see the Northern Lights, and a lot of visitors were coming to the park in the middle of the night when there was very few staff there, and having this dark sky, this Northern Light experience. So we were actually able to use that information from those counters to begin to develop a program and a product around night sky viewing and Northern Light viewing in the park. So I'm going to say that the trail counters are definitely still evolving, and if you do have counters in your park, use that data for exactly what you know. Use it to the best you can. Like, use it for whatever you can. It's not just figuring out how many people use your trails, but it's also understanding visitor use patterns, and potentially developing programs around that. So I'm seeing the chat happening as I'm talking. So the one counter specifically that I was talking about is a brand called Eco Counter. They are a company based out of France, and they do have a location in Quebec, and really great system that they use. The new Rouge National Urban Park in Toronto has a series of these eco counters set up, and we're really relying on that to help us with our visitor trends and understanding where and when our visitors are in the park.
Great, thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate that extra insight. I'm going to move on to the next question, but Mario, I do want to come back to you to have a quick conversation about how you brought the community back to your facilities. So we'll come back to that one. I'm just going to move on to the next question, and then we'll come back, Mario. So the next question is us moving into the future. We're a few steps behind Stephen, but we're going to get there, Stephen. And moving into the future beyond the pandemic, and consider the changes we've experienced because of it. I'd like you to share what's next. This is a window to what is being planned, emerging partnerships and opportunities being explored. So the question going out to Tara and Mark again, would you share what the long-term legacy will be on park visitation and operations and infrastructure that we all can look forward to seeing when we visit you again? Of course, when the time is right, and maybe touch a bit on technologies or major investments that you feel others should be considering, things that you have tried or consider trying moving forward. So Tara, I'm going to go to you, and then we'll close it off with Mark, and then there's a couple of other questions I want to do a quick round table on. So Tara, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian, and thanks for everyone who's worked so hard to put this together. And as Brian mentioned, I feel like I have so many friends on this call or on this webinar. So it's incredible to be here with you all. Let's see, my heart is kind of racing, not even out of nerves, but just listening to all that you have said, all of you, and thinking kind of more deeply about the future. I don't manage parks, but I work with a lot of people who do. So my perspective is kind of this bird's eye view. So I appreciate learning about your more detailed infrastructural and maintenance and managerial perspectives on natural area management. So that's where I'm coming from, is I just bring people together, and I happen to have a lot of people on my team that manage natural areas. So, you know, it's hard because I talked to a lot of folks before this so that I felt informed, and the same themes kept coming up. And this is so around infrastructure, parking. Like every group I talked to, I was like, why? This seems so obvious. Like, why does this keep coming up? And it came up because of fees. It came up because of social equality and equitable access. It came up for environmental reasons, because people are parking on the, on the side of the road in critical habitats. Parking kept coming up. So what do we do about parking going into the future, and fees and charges? Transportation kept coming up among all the partners that I talked to. And during the pandemic, a lot of the federal groups and state groups had to cut off their free transportation to natural areas. Again, an equitable access issue. They're trying to bring it back. But that was one of the major ways that they attracted people to their sites. What else kept coming up? Let's see. With the pandemic, they had to move to free events, virtual and in person. They had to move to free parking, free access, free this, free that, but yet they couldn't pay for transportation. So there's this back and forth. And as you all brought up, like, where's the revenue? Where's the revenue in that for so many organizations, state, federal, nonprofits that are managing sites? When you start reducing fees because you want equitable access, where's the revenue coming from? And, it's different, I think, for all of us in, 3 different countries, 4 different countries, there is no new normal. We're all coming from really different perspectives. And I want to be really careful about even using that term, the new normal, because the pandemic showed us a lot. It's almost like we bought 2 years of time to reinvent ourselves. We bought 2 years, and a lot of people died, and we have a lot of loss in society. But as conservation managers, we bought this bit of time to kind of regroup, innovate, and move forward. And so this isn't going to end. We're going to have wildfires. We're going to have massive climate change events. We're going to have another pandemic. We're going to have political issues that could separate and divide communities. And so I'm like looking forward, which is, I feel like, my question, like looking forward, it's how to create, I hate to be like negative, not a crisis management plan, but that resilience plan, to put it in positive terms. And thinking completely like outside of the box. I mean, we learned a lot during the pandemic, but outside of it. Today, I learned a lot about Norway and how they really have a, like, for example, a free to roam policy. Maybe many of you already know about this. I didn't realize this. A lot of tourism actually goes to Norway because they have a free to roam. policy. And so instead of thinking about trails and maintenance and, you know, all the infrastructure that goes into that, it's more of a, I hate to say it, socialized, but more of a communal perspective on the use of nature. I think what I've been learning from a lot of folks, especially in the United States, is that nature and parks and natural areas have now, they have been for a long time actually, become a commodity. And so when we talk about sustainability, sustainability implies that there's a commodity at stake, no? Like you're trying to not use too much of something. But what about nature for intrinsic purposes, for its intrinsic, you know, state, for, you know, I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but looking at it as more of a flow rather than so rigidly in our planning, and looking at all of our future planning through an equity lens into the future. Because I feel as though all of our investments in parks and trails and all these things, they aren't sustainable as a commodity if we don't engage the community in truly participating on those sites culturally, with their history, with indigenous culture and awareness. I mean, I feel as though so many of our investments are just, you know, jeopardized in the long run. So with that, you know, what does that look like? You know, we don't want to shortchange all of our natural areas. So there has to be some kind of revenue. So how do we come up with new revenue streams that are innovative in different fashions and forms that are still equitable and promote equity of use and accessibility? How do we maintain the sites that we have? Not just build infrastructure, which I tend to go towards, let's build infrastructure that's culturally relevant, right, to our communities. Let's build, and like what Mario's done at El Chaco, like let's create infrastructure that is true to our indigenous and cultures and heritage and the community. However, I read something today that really struck me. You don't go to a park because of the bathrooms, but you might never go back because of the bathrooms. So if you can't maintain what you already have, you know what I mean? So the maintenance now, like after reading a lot about it, is obviously number one, and maintaining what we have into the future. As infrastructure progresses, I believe that if we don't have an equity lens as a community of conservation professionals, this whole house of cards will fall. I think it's very fragile. I don't think we have a huge margin of error, especially with climate change, especially with poverty and social stress throughout the world. So I feel as though we need to kind of reinvent things, move forward, and just completely take a step back, consider what we've learned from the pandemic, but realize that we're going to keep going through waves, and our children will. And so preparing our planning for them to take over into the future. So with that, Mark, I don't know what you think. That might be a little controversial for you, Mark, because you're a trail maintenance or manager and park manager.
But a lot of great points there, and yes, Mark, I'm going to let you let you respond. And I think Mark nodded his head when you made your comment about remembering or forgetting washrooms. I can't remember how the wording was there, Tara, but a lot of fantastic points. And you know, one that has really resonated with me is this whole concept of reset. it's time for a reset, and also looking at things through the lens of resiliency is bang on. So Tara, thank you very much for those insights. I'm going to go to Mark very quickly, and any comments, Mark, on the future moving forward?
For sure, and I'll try to keep what I have to say short. First, I have to agree with Tara 100%. The pandemic provided a really unique opportunity to hit that sort of pause and reset button. I don't agree about the bathrooms, though. So if you do come to Kejimkujik, we've I'm putting in a bit of a plug here for the national park that I work for. We were the first national park to develop and implement fully inclusive and diverse bathrooms. So our new washroom buildings are very unique, and a lot of people actually do come to our park to see these new washrooms. But I know that trend will end pretty quickly. Lots has changed, and you know, even without the pandemic, lots would have changed, but the pandemic definitely added more to that. So I agree that the whole idea about the you know, that reset that took place, and for us at Parks Canada, it really allowed us to open our eyes to some of the things that we had been doing, some of the things we've been doing well, some things that we haven't been doing so well, and how to move forward to a new future where we could look at some new opportunities. You know, on top of the pandemic, you know, in Canada, for those of you who are from different parts of the world, we've learned a lot about ourselves over these last few years with the discovery of the residential school findings, which has had a significant impact on Parks Canada. You know, a lot has changed, and I think that the future for Parks Canada is, I'm proud to say this, and I can't just say this because I work for Parks Canada, but I think our future priorities, our future way of thinking is going to be significantly different than what we did in the past. You know, just as we were talking, Tara, I was I was shaking or nodding at some of your comments because I was just reading our new corporate priorities for the upcoming few years, and some of the things you talked about sustainability are key themes to our corporate priority. Relationships with our Indigenous partners. Kejimkujik National Park, a National Historic Site, is a National Historic Site because of the Mi'kmaq culture of the past, present, and the future. And we're actually now working towards changing our management structure of that park from a solely Parks Canada managed site to a cooperatively managed site with our Mi'kmaq partners. And it's something that is a very exciting process to be part of. A lot of Parks Canada sites, this is sort of unknown to a lot of people, but are cooperatively managed. So if you ever see a national park that's a national park preserve, that means that it's a cooperatively managed park between the federal government and the nations whose land that park is on. So Kluane National Park, Pac Rim National Park, a variety of them. You know, lots of change, lots of opportunities for us to moving forward. But just to touch on a few key things that I think we'll see changing at Parks Canada from the pandemic, from that were created during the pandemic, we'll move forward. One is our approach to visitor use management. Visitor use management, I think that's a probably common word that most people on this discussion have heard before. All of our sites got overwhelmed, and overwhelmed sites without proper planning can have a significant negative impact on what we're trying to achieve. So the work that we're doing around visitor use management right now is pretty remarkable. We have a whole staff dedicated to developing visitor use management plans and using some innovative ways of redirecting visitors. And I'm going to use an example of Banff National Park, the Johnson Canyon Trail. I don't know if anyone's ever walked the Johnson Canyon Trail, but it's a truly remarkable cantilevered structure that leads you through an amazing valley canyon and to two spectacular waterfalls. We see approximately 1 million visitors a year on that trail, and that trail, the infrastructure can't handle that. It can handle it, but the overall experience is not that great when you're in a line of people walking, you know, for an hour to go look at a waterfall just to walk back in that same line of people. So some of the work that we're doing is redirecting our visitors, allowing people to learn about other places in different parks and different areas to go to. So that whole idea around visitor use management is very key. Another thing that might not be a necessarily good thing for Parks Canada, but we've had to drastically change our level of service, for cleaning, our level of service for interaction with visitors, and I believe that is something that we will continue to have. So the Parks Canada guarantee, the level of service that we provide is significantly higher than what it would have been prior to the pandemic. Not that we were trying to treat visitors badly before, but we were forced to increase this level of service, and I think that's definitely a key thing that we'll move forward with. The new facility design. I mentioned the bathrooms at Kejimkujik. That is our new modern way of thinking. Parks Canada is a fully inclusive park managed sites. We invite all people, no matter who they are or what they are, and we welcome everybody to our sites. So we are going away with the designation or the symbols around gender. Everything is gender neutral, and we're also working very closely from an accessibility perspective to create a more welcoming and open place for all people. So that's not new because of the pandemic, but the pandemic definitely gave us an example for us to revisit this. At Kejimkujik right now, we're actually doing a full accessibility audit, and we're currently purchasing a variety of new accessible equipment. So for people with mobility or cognitive impairments, we'll have new opportunities for them to explore the park. So those are just a few. A couple of things I really want to touch on, though, and I apologize if I go over a little bit. But speaking about new technology, new technology, and we've heard every speaker pretty much so far talk about what's happening. Virtual tours. There's a big trend right now around virtual challenges. My wife ran the Cape Breton Cabot Trail virtual run this past summer. She did it from Ontario. She got the prize, but she got a medal and everything for doing it, even though she did it from here. So there's a lot of really neat stuff happening. One thing that we've really begun to explore is the concept of story maps and storytelling through story maps. Story maps are an Esri product, so an ArcGIS product. And we've actually been working very closely with our Mi'kmaq partners to develop a story map of their cultural past, their cultural present, and their cultural future. So we've been able to map the traditional roots of the Mi'kmaq people coming from the coast into Kejimkujik. Kejimkujik, just so everyone knows, is a Mi'kmaq word. It actually means little fairies. Little fairies are what all the little lakes are that are in the national park. And it's where the Mi'kmaq people would have wintered traditionally for many, many thousands of years. This story map brings this alive. And it's a tool that you can use. You can go online and you can actually view the story map. It's something that we can use for educational opportunities for school groups. And it's also something that we can include in our visitor centers. We actually have a story map right now in the Halifax Citadel. It's a large table. For people in Canada, it looks like a big air hockey table, and you have these like air hockey pucks. And as you move them around on the screen, it actually highlights areas and it talks about different stories from the past. Very, very interesting interactive display that you can set for future, present, or past experiences. So quite incredible. The other thing that and there's lots of other technology and ideas and innovative ideas coming across the country. The one program that I really feel has been successful and will continue to be successful is our interpretation programs. Interpretation is it's a unique experience. It's a one-on-one experience with the person telling a story or being engaged in some kind of experience. The interpreters that I've been working with have really used the pandemic to kind of change the way a lot of our interpretive programs are happening. As an example, we were locked up. We were told not to leave our homes. We were told to stay away from other people. And now reintroducing people to nature, reintroducing people to large group gatherings again, it's a bit of a challenge. So some of the interpretive staff that I work with have used this as an opportunity to enlighten people, to enhance their senses. So an example would be there's a night bike ride that's offered. So basically it starts at 10 o'clock at night, and you ride your bike up and down the roads of a park in pitch black. There's no lights allowed, and the whole idea is it's to cause, or to allow visitors to engage in the nighttime activities, to go somewhere where they're typically not comfortable. And it's just a remarkable experience. I've had the chance to actually do this on a couple occasions. We actually have one of our Mi'kmaq interpreters in Kejimkujik that does this, and she does the entire thing in traditional Mi'kmaq language. She doesn't say a word in English, and it doesn't matter. Like, just the impact of this program itself, it changes the mood, it changes the mindset, and it puts people at ease where they are. And then the final thing, and I realize I'm talking a lot, but the big push, one of the other big pushes I see right now is sort of our overall sustainability of a national park. And I'm quite proud to say Kejimkujik National Park and National Historic Site is a completely self-sufficient park. We have a whole solar array that provides all the electricity for our campground, as well as all of our electric vehicles and all the admin buildings and offices that we run. We have our own water treatment plant and sewage treatment plant. So basically, you know, if Kejimkujik is actually now returning power back to the province of Nova Scotia. So that is a huge push that I also see, not necessarily from the pandemic, but definitely the pandemic gave us an opportunity to kind of sit back and think about the way we operate and move towards a more sustainable future, which is pretty much exactly, Tara, sort of what you were getting at. You know, the days of throwing infrastructure in because we had money to blow are gone. Moving forward, we're looking at how can we invest in infrastructure, invest in programs that don't require long-term budgets, long-term maintenance, long-term headaches as we move forward. So those are some of the future trends, and I hope that you all get a chance to come to, you know, a national park, obviously in Canada at some point, one of Parks Canada sites, but any national or outside location, and enjoy it. And you know, and just remember that we're all kind of in this together, and we, like Tara said, right, this is going to be going on for a while, and let's just try to make the best of it and enjoy some of the opportunities that we have.
Wow, Mark, what a very inspiring close. I don't know if I can wrap it up any better than that. If I can just indulge you for a couple more minutes, I just wanted to go through the panelists, just one last quick question, and give them all kind of a minute to answer a couple of questions that have come up both through our question feed as well as chat. We're not going to get to all of them, but I would like to throw a couple of them out. So Stephen, I'm going to go to you first and say, Stephen, are you currently planning for 2022 to operate your parks and open spaces as you did in the last 2 years? I think we know the answer already to that, but maybe if you could just take a minute or two to build on that and how you've got there.
Sure, I think yes. I mean, we're already back to, you know, the parks were fully open, they never closed, as I mentioned. I think the one thing that we're looking at going forward into the future is a hybrid approach to events and our programming. There are simply some things that we've learned work better virtually. And so there'll be a hybrid approach as we go forward, but certainly the parks and open space will be functioning as they did. And I'm hopeful a legacy, I want to touch on what Tara had mentioned as well, that the pandemic gave us an opportunity to reevaluate how do we communicate with our constituencies, all our constituencies. And hopefully that's a lasting legacy where we've made improvements on how we you know, collaborate with organizations like Black Outside or Latino Outdoors, and making sure that we put the effort and energy into translating important information into Spanish and for our large Spanish speaking community. So the pandemic, you know, hopefully the lasting legacy for us will be making sure that all spaces are inclusive and everybody feels welcome, and that it's inclusive. It's not just words that we're saying, it's actual effort that we're putting in to making the community all feel welcomed at our parks and open spaces.
Thank you, Stephen. Mario, I just wanted to come back. A question I've written down here. I wanted to ask you about was, can you tell me, or tell the audience, I guess, what strategies did you use to bring the community back to the garden?
You know, going directly to basics of understanding the ecosystem and the interactions in the territory were very important and significant. We also did all this ethnobotany project where we worked with 5 indigenous communities of 3 municipalities, and we gathered information in order to learn and collect specimens from all this area. And we also worked in terms of all this traditional knowledge and rescuing all this knowledge related with the traditional use of about 260 species of different plants. And from there, we are now working with the community in terms of pretty much we're going to have a 5-month session with the nearby State University of Querétaro to develop a course for people to learn to speak and write Otomi. So those are part of the main actions that we are putting together, and we're focusing these actions more towards the most vulnerable part of society here in San Miguel de Allende, a city that is that holds some of the most richest people in the country and also the poorest people in the country. So we have that social inequity, which is so big. So we have to also think of the importance of, yes, the operation of the site, but we are also considering after this COVID pandemic that when everyone is talking about normality, of their new normality, everyone's rushing to go back to the situations or conditions that were before. And we have to stop and say, wait a second. Those conditions that we had before brought us to the COVID situation. So we've got to really have a different approach towards post-pandemic. And much of this is what we're doing is we're pushing through policy making in order to make spaces such as these more accessible to the most vulnerable section of the community. So we are going back to focalized or identified schools, colonias, urban areas here in the city who are the most vulnerable part of society here in San Miguel de Allende.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mario. Appreciate that. And my one last question, and Simon, I'm going to give you about a minute or two to respond to this. And that is, you guys have just opened back up again. And I'm going to assume that the population is going to start wandering around Australia again, and maybe perhaps even start wandering internationally again. And I just wonder, through the lens of Lake Macquarie, for those areas that have started to see perhaps too much use, how do you start to redirect people to discover other places?
I think people will always want to go to the areas, the big popular areas. Lake Macquarie's never really been one of those places. We're not a tourist destination in the same way that somewhere like the Gold Coast or in Kakadu or but we're a destination for people from nearby, some people from Sydney, but it's really for the benefit of our own community. I think whilst I know certain parts of the city would love to be this international destination, and I think tourism and people traveling around is important, but I also think it's really important to people to discover their natural places, especially with people working from home. We've had a lot of people move to the city, and because they can work from home. They don't have to live in a big city, and they want to be able to enjoy the natural environment that's there as part of their everyday life, rather than somewhere they go to on holidays. And I think, to me, that's a challenge that we need to do for our future planning. Make sure that we don't, allow people to pay respect and don't lose those natural values. Also, the cultural and First Nations people values of our city. Understand those every day of the week, not just on holidays. And I think that's something that I would like to see. People will still want to travel, but I'd rather people be able to visit their a nice piece of natural environment, every week or even every morning on their morning walks. And I think that's a really big part of the well-being that we really see our natural areas providing.
Great. Thank you very much, Simon. Well, I think I'm going to bring this to a close. And before I turn it back over to Tori, I just personally, from me, very heartfelt thanks to Mark, Mario, Stephen, Tara, and Simon. I've worked alongside a few of you, and now I've worked alongside for a few weeks, all of you. And I've certainly enjoyed this. I've enjoyed the conversations. I've enjoyed the camaraderie and just learning from you. And I hope those that are on the webinar, the workshop today, have learned as much in the last 2 hours as I've been learning over the last couple of weeks with this group. And I just can't, I can't wait to do it again. Mario, I've got to get to Guanajuato. Mexico is near and dear to my heart. My backdrop is El Corcovado. It is a community park. I have planted trees there with my colleague, Phil Davis, and it holds a special place. So I can't wait to get down and see your garden. With that, I'm going to close. And Tori, I'm just going to say thank you so much. And here's my plug for what's next. I would love to see this continue, this dialogue to continue. I'd love to see us talk about resiliency. I'd love to see us continue talking about inclusive and equitable access and how it needs to grow within our conservation authority. And last but not least, I think we've definitely got a lead speaker on new technologies, and perhaps we need to invite Mark to a full-on session on new technologies and to see what opportunities there. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys have been amazing, and stay safe. Carry on, and as the chair of our board says, take time to enjoy the view. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you so much to our panelists for being with us tonight. That is a wrap on our discussion. And really, I love the points of the discussion that touch on taking that pause to reevaluate our priorities in land and resource management. That's huge. We have the opportunity now, and if it's important through policy and management planning. So thank you so much. If you wish to reach out to any of our panelists, their email addresses are on screen now. We'll connect you with whomever you wish to speak to. If you can't grab a screenshot here, or if you'd like to collect it in the chat, of course, the chat will be provided to all of our panelists after the webinar. But here's how you connect with anyone you'd like to speak to. And next, we just want to thank our sponsors once again for their support. While we cannot, currently host an in-person exhibitors marketplace like we usually do with the workshop, the conservation areas are consistently supported by new and dedicated products and services that we're grateful to those who took the opportunity to support us on this digital platform. And finally, an acknowledgement to the people working behind the scenes. Thank you, Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, namely Phil Davies, Dan Andrews, and Brian Kemp. Thank you, Conservation Ontario, Nikisha Mohammed and Jane Lewington for your promotional efforts and the use of your Zoom platform. And thank you to our Conservation Areas Committee. As always, we have that brief video to show you who we are.
Tori Fisher, Administrator for Conservation Parks with Credit Valley Conservation.
Liam Fletcher, Hamilton Conservation Authority, Superintendent of Confederation Beach Park.
Mike Armstrong, Assistant Superintendent, Grand River Conservation Authority.
John Massman, South Nation Conservation.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikisha Mohammed and I'm the Communications Officer at Conservation Ontario and a member of the CA Workshop Committee.
Ryan Mackett, Lakehead Region Conservation Authority.
Hi there, my name is Brandon Goods and I am the Superintendent of Conservation Areas with Long Point Region Conservation Authority.
Brenna Bartley, Conservation Halton.
David Orr from Credit Valley Conservation.
Dan Andrews, Lake Simcoe Conservation.
Hi, I'm Zachary Cox, Marketing Coordinator with Long Point Region Conservation Authority. Thank you so much to all of our presenters and to everyone who joined us here today.
Okay, that's all for tonight. Thank you all for being here and supporting our endeavors. We're already planning our next opportunities. We're looking at in person. We're so hopeful for that this year, but we'll let you know. So take care of each other and have a great night.